Is Apple blocking parental control apps because they are competitors to screen time? This is a long story going back to sometime last fall. Apple has removed some parental control apps. In fact, they've removed 11 of the top 17 parental control apps from their app store over the past several months. Some folks believe that this is being done in order to protect Apple's investment in their own screen time management software called Screen Time. Others think Apple's just legitimately trying to protect the privacy of their users. There is a lot of back and forth and they said going on in this story, so I've tried to take a look at all the sides and come up with some conclusions to help parents know what this means for you. There will be further developments in this story and I will keep you up to date as they happen, but as of right now, here's what we know. Apple started removing some of these apps, citing privacy and data security concerns. Whenever they were asked what was going on, apparently Apple says that they gave these companies 30 days to try to fix their apps, and the companies are saying that there was no such time limit given. The product of concern here is something called MDM, or mobile device management. This is something that Apple originally intended for businesses who give iPhones to their employees to be able to use to make sure that they're using these work devices for work purposes. But parental control apps use the same system to help parents monitor what their kids do on their devices. So when Apple says to a parental control app developer, I need you to take this system off of your app because you're not using it in the way it was intended, these app developers have to come against that and say, no, we can't do that because then our app isn't functional at all, and a parental control app doesn't give parents any control. Obviously, this is a major problem for these 11 companies who had their apps removed from the App Store. So the story continues that apps like Mobisip, Our Pact, and Custudo have all had their apps removed and have been in conversation with Apple to try to get it fixed. In the article linked to in this video, you can click through to find some of the back and forth that Apple had with Our Pact while this whole issue was happening. The conclusion is really just a bunch of blaming. Apple is blaming these companies for using the MDM in a way it's not supposed to be used, connecting the data and information given by children against the COPPA Act. But the companies are blaming Apple for not telling them anything about the privacy concerns, but only saying you can't block apps, you can't block apps, we don't allow you to block apps. This past weekend, the New York Times released an article that kind of outlines some of the concerns. It might be titled a little clickbaity because it's straight up accusing Apple of trying to protect their own app interests by blocking these other apps, but the information in there can still be concerning for those of us who are trying to protect our kids, and especially those of us who are trying to help you protect your kids as a family tech safety expert. While the story is not over, there's a lot more going on. A couple of these companies have even filed a lawsuit against Apple in the UK. So we are nowhere near the end of this story, but I thought it was important for me to help you parents understand what all this might mean for us. First and foremost, no matter what they tell you, no matter what you read, there are no perfect parental control apps. The cheap or free ones are probably selling your data. The expensive ones are probably breaking some rule in order to work effectively. See, we have this conundrum. Apple and even Google and Android to some extent have a responsibility to protect their users' data. And Apple takes that responsibility very, very seriously. At least they say that they do. Because of that, they have to limit the access they give certain apps in the App Store. And if that access is undermined by the way the app is developed, they remove the app. But some of these apps, especially apps that want to control what you do on the device, have to have certain accesses, and much of that isn't given to them by Apple. We use the analogy of a sandbox, and we say you're allowed to play in this sandbox. Google says, hey, the whole backyard is a sandbox, and on these Android devices, you can almost do whatever you want. While Apple says, here, the corner over here, this is where you can play. We control everything else. As a user of an iPhone, I like the small sandbox. But if I was developing an app that did parental controls, I would be miserable working in that little sandbox. It would make my life so difficult. And that's what we're seeing here. We're also possibly seeing Apple actually trying to protect their interest in having an app that gives parents control over the screen time and content their kids are using. They want you to use that version of it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it makes their product more viable and more interesting to parents if there's something built in. So you may buy that instead of an Android phone. Number two, if you're using their version of parental controls, they're being able to see what is done with your data because they're the ones that have the data. They're the ones who see that phone is used by a child. We can't collect the information. We can just use that information to let the parent manage what they do on the device and leave it at that. Do they do that? They say they do, and right now all we can do is take their word for it. But they don't have people sitting in the offices at OurPact or at Mobisip to make sure that the data is being used the way they think it should be used. And because they take such a heavy stance against the misuse of people's data, especially children's data, they would prefer you use their built-in screen time software. Now, they have some things they need to fix to make it more effective. The filter is weak. It is. The way it gets set up can be a little bit complicated. I've helped families do it. I've gone in and done it for them, and many of them needed my help because they couldn't just figure it out on their own. Also, you have to create an iCloud account for each person. Even though you can make a child's account, it can get kind of annoying. So yes, there are things that need to be done to make screen time better. But Apple believes, and I'm not saying whether I think this is right or wrong, but Apple believes if you're going to use parental controls, you should use the ones they've established because that way you are getting the same privacy and the same data security standards that the rest of the iPhone gives you, instead of handing permissions over to some other app developer. I believe that is their stance. I believe that is why they're coming against these apps seemingly all of a sudden. They couldn't come against these apps a year ago when they didn't have screen time. It didn't make sense to say, no, you can't have parental control apps on our device. We can't allow it. But now that screen time is out, perhaps they're cracking down, possibly just to get more usage, but also to keep you from using a parental control software that takes yours and your kids' data and doesn't treat it properly or securely. 3 quick things that parents need to realize no matter what side of this issue you stand on, or if you're like me, kind of right in the middle. First of all, this falls to parents to make the right choice. We have to be vigilant to set up proper restrictions on our kids' devices. Whether we use screen time, whether we use Android Family Link or some other software, we have to do what we can to protect our kids. Secondly, you may consider using something like Circle to protect your kids on the network level instead of in the device itself. We use Circle. It is something that we have that protects our whole Wi-Fi. So when our kids use their devices, they're not allowed to take them outside of the home. So they are automatically filtered and all of that, even if we didn't set up screen time for them on their devices. Finally, until Apple makes it easier for third-party apps to access some of the information in the iPhone, it's going to be hard to get a really, really high-quality parental control app. And we're seeing that again. They've said the way you're using this system isn't the way we designed it to be used, and we would like you to stop. If they want app developers to make parental control apps, they have to give them proper access. If they're not willing to give access, then they need to improve screen time, make it the easiest and best and most effective screen time content management parental control app available, and then we won't complain anymore. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Michael Prince with BecauseFamily.org and FamilyTechBlog.com. Please visit BecauseFamily.org/partnership or Patreon.com/BecauseFamily to give to our ministry and help us keep making these podcasts, videos, and blog posts. Thank you for watching.